Let's get into the message tonight. An evangelist was preaching at a Christian college. At the end of one of the services, a young lady came up to him and with urgency in her voice and her countenance, she said, "I need to talk to you." After most of the crowd had left, he made time to talk with her, and they sat on the edge of the platform as she wept and told her story. A few months before that time, her dad, a godly man, had been killed suddenly in an automobile accident. She had handled her dad's death pretty well until the time came for the family to go through Dad's personal things. Everyone in the family was shocked to find out something they did not know at all, that Dad had kept a personal diary. Neither his wife nor his children knew this at all. They were astonished to read a note for every day going back for years. They were blessed and delighted to read page after page of thoughts and happenings from Dad's life they didn't even know it existed. Then they saw something that caused each of them to get really excited. They found a page for each of the children. And on each page were the prayers he had been praying for each child. There was a prayer for Joe. It read, "Oh God, Joe's a good boy. He loves you. He's trying to make it through college because he wants to minister and be more effective for you. The finances are tight. Oh God, please supply his needs." Then there was a page for Susie, and it read, "Oh Lord, Susie's a good girl. She's trying to serve you. Please bless her, strengthen her, watch over her." The girl telling the story said she got really excited. She grabbed the diary and said, "I want to find my page." She flipped over several pages, and there was her name written across the top of a page. And almost breathlessly, she read that which was written underneath her name. I want to speak to you. I'll share more of that later. I want to speak to you tonight on the subject, understanding loyalty in a disloyal world. And I want you to notice with me principles of loyalty and disloyalty in the lives of David and the men who surrounded David's life. Why David? David's name is mentioned 968 times from Ruth to Revelation, which is more times than any other person I can find in the entire Bible, even the Lord Jesus himself. David was not a perfect man, but he was a righteous leader. The Psalms David wrote, including the 23rd Psalm, showed David's heart for God. When God wanted us to understand what kind of leader King Jesus is going to be, at least 3 times we're told that he will sit on the throne of his father David. David was a leader who knew how to weep and how to rejoice, how to repent and how to forgive, how to fight battles and how to let God fight his battles, how to make decisions and how to issue commands, how to be patient and tolerant, and how to carry out justice. David was, in every sense of the word, one of the greatest leaders in the Bible or in all of history. What might we learn about loyalty from this great man's life? Number one, wisely and consciously choose those to whom you give your loyalty. Now, in the life of David are 2 pictures of loyalty that are as great as any pictures in the Bible or in history. One relates to Jonathan, and the other relates to Idai. David's encounter with Idai takes place at one of the lowest points in the life of David. David's son Absalom, his son Absalom, had sat in the gate of the city, stolen the hearts of the men of Israel from their king. At an appointed time, under the guise of doing something very spiritual and religious, he had trumpets blown and the announcement made that he was king. He mounted a full-scale rebellion against his father. In danger for his very life, his dad David fled the city of Jerusalem. As David was leaving, he ran into Idai. Here was a man who you ought to remember and emulate. He gets my award for Mr. Loyalty in the entire Bible. Then said the king to Idai the Gittite, "Wherefore goest thou with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile, whereas thou camest but yesterday. Should I this day make thee go up and down with us?" David says, "Idai, you don't owe me any loyalty. You've just arrived here from another country. I haven't done anything to earn or deserve your loyalty." And Idai answered the king and said, "As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. What an incredible response. He says, King, when I came here, I chose you to be my king. Wherever you go, I go. If you die, I die. And if you live, I live. It sounds very similar to what Ruth said to Naomi. Idai owed David no loyalty, but he hazarded everything for what honestly looked like a lost cause. Now, wait a minute. David is the same man. His son Absalom is rebelling against him, while this foreigner Idai is ready to die for him. What's going on? Idai was doing something Absalom, David's son, should have done. Idai has wisely and consciously chosen to give his loyalty to his king. He doesn't even know what's going on with this thing with Absalom. He knows that King David is a man of God. He is God's anointed. He is the king. He's a poor communicator. He's a weak father. He's overly patient and tolerant. Idai may or may not know this. It doesn't matter. His loyalty he has chosen, it will not change. Loyalty depends on you, not on the person you're following. You should wisely and consciously choose those to whom you give your loyalty. You can give respect and acceptance to just about anyone, but not loyalty. Loyalty is more than faithfulness. A person may be so faithful to a task that he appears to be loyal to the leader, when in reality his faithfulness is just self-serving. Loyalty is more than cooperation. Cooperation simply may be something necessary to get a job done. Loyalty is an attitude of your heart which cannot be neutral. I once counseled a young man having conflicts with his daddy. Honestly, his dad was somewhat an unreasonable man and very difficult to get along with. I knew the man for years. The young man was trying to avoid conflict by avoiding his dad. I said to him, son, humility and loyalty are not neutral qualities. They are positive and active. You must not just avoid your dad. You must seek to serve him and answer his pride with humility and his anger with meekness. Loyalty is not neutrality. Loyalty is not the absence of disloyalty. Loyalty is not simply refusing to listen to bad information. Loyalty defends. Loyalty is positive. Loyalty doesn't just say, I don't want to hear that. Loyalty says, let me tell you some things about this person that will help you really know who this person is. It is a lack of faith and a self-centered focus to concentrate more on those following me than on those whom I am following. Let me say that again. It is a lack of faith and a self-centered focus to concentrate more on those following me than on those whom I am following. It is easier for a wife to see her children disobeying her than it is for her to see herself disobeying her husband. It's easier for a husband to see his wife disobeying him than it is for him to see himself disobeying his pastor or his employer. It's easier for any of us to see those under us disobeying us than it is for us to see ourselves disobeying God. Are you loyal? Number two, give loyalty to people and positions, not just to personalities. Why? Because sometimes people to whom you should be loyal have difficult or eccentric personalities. Just after David's victory over Goliath, King Saul's captain Abner brought David in to see the king. I could have colorized that picture. It's just a little too gross to colorize if you look at it very closely. David is actually holding the head of Goliath, whom he's just defeated. Saul's son is standing behind his father, King Saul. And Jonathan is listening in. And as David talked that day, his heart came out. When he made an end of speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped him of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle. Sometimes God will bring across your path some godly person who should be your friend for life. Give that person your loyalty. Once you do, never take it away. He or she will face difficulties. Stand by him. Pray for him. Encourage him. Do all in your power to lift him. But Brother Davis, what if he compromises? Then talk to him. Plead with him. Appeal to him. If necessary, separate from him, but don't remove your loyalty. Your loyalty is what he will need in order to find his way back to the path that he left. Your loyalty is what will get him, bring him back. It'll be a way, a path for him to get back. How easy it would be. I think I'll just throw a story in right there. I had a preacher friend, Brother Duffett, who messed up his life. And he did it rather deliberately. Pastor of a church, running over 1,000 people, incredible ministry, television ministry, radio ministry, all kinds of ministry, and he messed up. And after he messed up, I had another friend. He and I were both his friends. And he told his other friend, he said this. He said, I know that I've lost all my friends except for 2. And he said, I know that neither you nor Brother Davis likes what I have done, but I also know that y'all are going to love me and you're going to be there for me. If I need you, you will come and help me. You know what? He's right. He was very right. Did I like what he did? No. I talked to him about it. I spent an hour on the telephone talking to him about it. And when we got done, we hadn't gotten anywhere, but I told him, I still love you. I'm there for you when you need me. How easy it would be to be loyal if every person in authority over our lives was a kind, easygoing, likable, wise, godly, perfect person who wanted to meet our every need. Guess what? It's not always that way. Sometimes God requires you and me to give loyalty to someone because they're in authority over us, even though they have a rotten personality. King Saul was an angry, jealous, vengeful, unreasonable man. David had done nothing wrong, but Saul was jealous of David and tried to smite him to the wall with a javelin while David was playing music for the king. David had to run for his life, and he ran for months. Over and over, Saul tried to kill David, and David had to run. And David never ceased to be loyal to Saul. Do you know why? 9 times David referred to Saul as the Lord's anointed. David recognized that Saul's position was given to him by God, and therefore Saul deserved loyalty even from the man he wanted to kill. What is your excuse for being disloyal? Are you loyal? Number 3, loyalty to human leadership is really loyalty to God Himself. I'm going to show it. Loyalty is a choice that you make and then you prove over and over again for the rest of your life. Loyalty doesn't change based on rumors. I appreciated the preacher friend who called me a while back and said, Brother Davis, I was at a preacher's meeting. A couple of preachers were standing there talking. They said, you know S.M. Davis? Yeah, I know who he is. Did you hear that he's gone liberal, that he's starting to use contemporary Christian music in his church and some other stuff? And my friend was standing right there and walked over and said, "Who you talking about?" "Oh, you're talking about S.M. Davis. He's my friend." "What you saying about him?" "You know what? I think I'll just call him and find out." Call me on the telephone. "Brother Davis, I heard this. I knew it wasn't so, but I wanted to call and confirm it with you so that I could tell them." I said, "Thank you, brother, for calling. And no, I haven't gone liberal. And thank you for being a loyal friend, a true friend." Loyalty is a choice you make. It doesn't change based on rumors that you hear. And loyalty depends on you, not on the person you're following. Now, you must learn to distinguish between loyalty and worship. Worship is something you give to God alone. In Acts chapter 14, after Paul and Barnabas healed that lame man, the people tried to worship Paul and Barnabas. And Paul rebuked them. Loyalty is something you give to God and to people because your worship and obedience to God demands it. The only way to give loyalty is to recognize the hand of God choosing this person for you to be loyal to, or to see the hand of God placing this one over you in authority. David referred to King Saul 9 times, and I got a problem right there, but didn't realize it. The word "the Lord's anointed" is supposed to be on the side right over there. David referred to King Saul 9 times as the Lord's anointed. David had a sister, named Zeruiah, who had 3 sons by the names of Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. All 3 of those nephews of David's were mighty warriors. Abishai was with David in 1 Samuel 26 when King Saul, thank you preacher, came with 3,000 men to the wilderness of Ziph to seek and kill David. Saul set up camp and then went to sleep. David saw Saul, and David got Abishai to go with him to the side of sleeping Saul. When when Abishai wanted to kill Saul, David refused. Why? Because David saw Saul as the Lord's anointed. David had to run from Saul just to survive, but he never quit being loyal. More than 25 years later, David was running for his life from his son Absalom, who had taken the throne. Abishai is again by his side. Shimei curses and throws stones at David. And Abishai wanted to kill Shimei. And David stopped him. And later in 2 Samuel 19, we read, "But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he hath cursed the Lord's anointed?" That is the only other time in the Scriptures that phrase, "the Lord's anointed," occurs. Why was Abishai loyal to David all those years? Because he learned from David that the king was the Lord's anointed. Wives, you need to look past your husband and see the Lord is really the one to whom you're in submission when you follow your husband. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. Children, you need to look past your parents and see that God is the one who placed your parents in their position as parents. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Employee, you need to look past your employer and see that God placed your boss in his position over you. Servants, be obedient to them, your masters, with fear and trembling, in singleness of your heart, as unto Christ. Obedience to authority is obedience to God. Loyalty is looking for opportunities to be obedient to earthly authority because it sees God's authority behind it. And disloyalty, or a disloyal spirit against earthly authorities, is really disloyalty against God Himself. In any situation where you wonder whether or not you've been loyal or disloyal, simply ask yourself this question: if the leader had been Jesus Himself, would I have responded any differently? Follow no man to hell. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying. Follow no man into sin. Follow no man into false doctrine. Follow no man into compromise. But don't forget that loyalty to human leadership is really loyalty to God Himself. Are you loyal? Number 4, loyalty is needed to make you what you ought to be. It's easy to think of loyalty as a follower doing what the leader wants done. But loyalty is much more than that. Loyalty is not just needed for the person being served. Loyalty is needed much more by the person serving himself, because it is the follower's loyalty to the leader that helps make the follower that which he ought to be. A lady was counseling with my wife. My wife's right over there. Regine, lift your hand where they can see you. She said to my wife, other family members tell us the reason our marriage is strong is because we don't have problems like they do. But they're wrong. It's because when we've had problems, we got counsel. And we followed the counsel that we got. And that's the reason our marriage is strong. That couple's loyalty makes the difference in their lives. Young man about to go to Bible college said to his parents, if I even see a girl I think is pretty, you'll be the first ones to know about it. That type of loyalty can save a young man many heartaches. It was Elisha's loyalty to Elijah. And Elijah, have you read that passage? Elijah was not easy to be loyal to. Man, he was a strange guy. I'm not being critical of him. He's one of the greatest men in the Bible, but he was strange. And it was his loyalty. It was Elisha's loyalty to Elijah that enabled him to have a double portion of the Spirit of God upon his life after Elijah went to heaven. The Bible plainly teaches that disloyalty to church leadership damages you. Obey. This, I believe, is the most important verse in the Bible for church members. The most important verse, I believe, for pastors is in 1 Peter. But I believe this is the most important verse in the Bible for church members. Every church member ought to know this verse, if not have it posted on the walls in their home. Read it with me, would you please? Obey them that have the rule over you, and submit yourselves, for they watch for your souls as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief. Pause. May I ask you, when your pastor hears your name, does a smile come to his face or does a frown come to his heart? Because if a frown comes to his heart, it is unprofitable for you, not for him. Yes, it is unprofitable for him. Yes, it is difficult for him if he's trying to help you to mature and grow spiritually, and you won't move. You have set your feet in place and you don't want to hear what the preacher's got to say, so you're going to be bullheaded and you're going to go your own way. Yes, that hurts him, but it brings more damage to you than to him. You know how, preacher? Some people, you just hear the name. Joy. Thank God. Joy. Joy. Which is it for you? For that. Read the rest of it. For that is unprofitable for you. That brings damage to you. I have a whole message. Last year, after 36 and a half years of pastoring, I had a major heart attack. Had 2 heart surgeries within a week's time. And within the next few weeks after that, I was continuing to have difficulties. I still have difficulties. I have chest pains all the time. Day before 2 nights ago, I was standing up preaching. Had a pretty good chest pain while I was preaching. I thought about stopping, and then I just kept going. Thank God I hadn't had any problems today speaking 4 times. But anyway, it's just sort of an ongoing thing that we've just sort of learned to live with. But I've realized that the pressures and stresses of pastoring, that, when I was checked into the hospital, they said, all right, they're getting your name, they're getting your address, they're getting all this. Now, what do? I tell them what I do, and they all stop and look at you. I guess you know that the number one stress position, I mean, everybody, the insurance companies recognize this. Everybody recognizes this. You've got the number one stress position in the world. It is bigger than anything else. And did you know what I found out when I was about to step down? I saw some things I'd never seen before. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11 or 12, I think it's chapter 12, Paul talked about all the things he'd been through. He talked about a day and a night in the deep. He talked about shipwreck. He talked about being beaten with whips. He talked about going without food for days. He talked about all of these different things, and he said, he listed all those things and one side, and then he said, besides all this, the cares of all the churches. Here's the load of all loads. And now, what does the Bible say? The Bible says, casting all your care upon Him, for He cares for you. Study the context. Given specifically to pastors. Good for everybody. Principle's true for everybody. But here's the thing I had never seen before till last year, preacher. Paul said, here's all this big list. Here's that which cometh upon me daily. The cares of all the churches. And it's like this. Every single day, Pastor, you have to cast all that care on Him. Problem is, when you wake up tomorrow morning, it's back again. And you have to do it again. And the next day, it's back again, and you have to do it again. And let me tell you something. If you add to your pastor's stress, care, whatever you want to call it, it will shorten his life. I am convinced of it. But ultimately, it is greatly unprofitable for you. Do you know what the picture of this is? Do you remember in the book of Exodus where Moses stood up on the mount and the battle was going with the Amalekites in the valley below, and Moses stood there and held his hands up. As long as his hands were held up, the people in the valley below had victory. All of the children of Israel had victory. But you stand and try to hold a staff above your head and find out what that's like. I actually do that some places. I don't care how heavy it is. It may be 3 pounds. You hold it and hold it and hold it. After about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that thing starts weighing 50 pounds. After 30 minutes, and what happened was Moses' hands got heavy. He simply could not hold it up anymore. Can you imagine what it felt like as his hands began to drop and he could see in the valley below? And a man, he's about to die, and he has to shove his hands back up. Somebody's about to die, and he pushes his hand back up, but he can't hold it up. That is a picture. If his hands aren't lifted, you are defeated. It is unprofitable for you. They watch for your souls. Do you know what the pastor's job is? Watch me. Here's the pastor's job. What needs do they have? You say, Brother Duffett stood up and preached, and he sideswiped me. Oh, no. Never a sideswipe. Always a head-on collision. And you know, that sounds rough, so pardon the roughness of that. The truth is, it's not a sideswipe or a head-on collision. It's I love you, and I see this need in your life. Preacher, how many times you ever preach a whole message to several hundred people, but there's one person it was there for? And what's really sad is when they didn't show up that day. You know, I've done it. I preached there's a message back there on the table entitled Sinning Against Great Light. All the young people from a church like this church ought to see that message. Because sometimes young people get sort of a wild hair. And they're going to, well, you know, I see everything everybody out there in the world is doing, and, you know, I think I can do that. No, you're not everybody out there in the world. Jesus said to the city of Capernaum, if Sodom and Gomorrah had what you've got, it would have never been destroyed. Capernaum, you have had great light. You are responsible for that. And I say to every young person here, you're in a church like this. Do you realize where you are? Do you have any idea where you're sitting tonight? May I say to you, everybody out yonder has not experienced what you've experienced, seen what you've seen, learned what you've learned, know what you know. You're accountable for it. God gives you light. He gives you light so that you can do something with that light, so you can respond to that light. And He holds you accountable for the light that God gives you. And that message was preached unashamedly for one young man who'd gotten a crazy thing in his head. And he had one of the finest young men in our church, come from one of the finest families in our church, and one morning about 4:30 in the morning, without giving his parents any warning, he packed up his bags and moved across town. I watched his mother for the next several days. I mean, she couldn't sit in church without crying. I watched her visibly begin to age. You could see it in days. I mean, months of time were being compressed into hours. She was aging. It was killing her. She'd invested her life in this boy. She'd loved him. They'd trained him. He'd been in church. He'd been in a Christian school. He'd been trained. He'd been cared for. They were expecting things out of his life. And moves across town, and it's just, I looked for him, couldn't find him. Tried to find him, actually went to where he worked trying to get him. He wouldn't answer his cell phone. And his daddy was, you know how we men are. Daddy's hurting, but okay, if he wants to do something stupid, he's going to learn the hard way. And Mama's she's crushed. Finally, I got him to answer his cell phone one day. And I said to him, "Hey man, how you doing? I love you. I miss you. What's happening?" And he talked to me for a little while. And then I said, let's go out to eat. Can I? And we went out to eat. And I sat down and looked across the table at him, and I said, "Have you seen your mama? Do you know what you're doing to your mama? I love you. I'm not being mean. I love you. Have you seen what you're doing to your mama?" And it had been like 6 weeks since he'd been in church. And I said, "Look, come on back to church Sunday. Come on back. It's all right. I think the church will be all right. Just come on back. We love you." And he said, "I'll be there Sunday morning." And God gave me that message. It was preached for him. And I preached that whole message. And I watched for him to come forward on the invitation. He didn't. I watched him as he stood back there with his head down like this. A little while later, service is over and he's out in the hallway. I walked up and I said, "How you doing, man?" I said, "You know that whole message was for you." He said, "Yeah, I know it." I said, "You didn't get right with God yet, did you?" He said, "No, I didn't." I said, "Are you ready yet?" He said, "Yeah, I think I am." Walked back in my office. I could take you to the spot. There's still a stain there where the tears fell. And he got right with God. Now, preacher, I'm going somewhere with this. A few days later, I went to his daddy. He moved back home. By the way, he's in Bible college right now. I think he's in his 3rd year of Bible college. He's helping in a church while he's in Bible college, leading the singing, going soul winning, just doing a great job. We're excited. He comes back home, tells me what he's doing. His dad and mom are happy. I went to his daddy and I said, "I got to ask you a question." He said, "What is it?" I said, "I don't understand something." He said, "What don't you understand?" I said, "What I did for your son. Your son's not the first boy I ever did that for. You pastor 36 years. You're going to have some. Get a wild hair and do something stupid." And I said, "I've gone to other young men, but your son was one of the few who ever listened to me. I need to know, why did your son listen to me when most of the others didn't?" I said, "Why did he sit in that restaurant, show me respect, show me honor, listen to everything I said, and come to church the next Sunday morning? Why did he do that?" And the dad looked at me and he said, Brother Davis, we've been in this church. We were in another church in Texas. He said, boy's been in church all his life. He said, never, ever, one single time has that boy ever heard us say one bad thing about the preacher. Amen. Amen. And he said, when we needed you, he respected you because he'd never heard anything bad about you. Now you tell me that in all those years of me being his pastor, somebody else being his pastor, that those folks didn't have some kind of problem with the pastor, some kind of problem with the preacher, something they didn't like, something that irritated them, something that messed them up. Their loyalty saved them. Do you see that? That is the reason that every church needs an Aaron and Hur holding up the hands of the preacher. Because if you're not lifting up the hands of the preacher, the battle, you're going to be defeated. Everybody stands or falls together. I was so impressed. I don't know of any church I preach in may need this less than this church does, but every church needs what I'm preaching. I was so impressed when I was here a little over 3 years ago, and your pastor gone 3 months taking care of his physical needs. And the cares of the church are always, you never got away from the cares of the church. You can't tell me you did. I know. I had a heart attack on Sunday. The following Friday, I was having heart surgery. Saturday evening, I was at home and I said to my family, the church is going to be worried about me. And I need to make a video. Somebody come over here, make a video you can play at church tomorrow so they know their pastor's all right. I can't be there, but they can at least know that their pastor is all right. Obey them, have room. If you're not loyal, you may not know till you get to heaven all your life could have been. Disloyalty drastically, dramatically cuts back on your life potential. 1985. God sent to our church a godly retired preacher who had started and pastored several churches. Evan Bainham, in his 80s, knew more about pastoring and preaching than I could know in several lifetimes. He drove 35 miles one way to our church for the last years of his life till God took him to heaven in 1988. Do you know what that man used to do? He had started 6 churches in his life. He would check with me every time before he'd go preach somewhere. But Davis, I'm planning to be gone 2 weeks from now. I'm going to preach for Brother so-and-so. I just want to make sure that's all right with you. I've never had a problem with that. But this man, twice my age, would say, you're my pastor. I won't go anywhere or do anything you don't want me to do. Why would he do that? Because he was a man who wanted the blessing and the profitability of being under authority. Loyalty is needed to make you what you ought to be. Are you loyal? Number 5, loyal person seeks to understand both the words and the heart of his leader. Now, why is that important? Because loyalty is more than just fulfilling orders and commands. Loyalty is concerned with making the one who is the leader a success. The loyal follower realizes his success in life is found in pleasing God, which also means pleasing the one God has given you to serve. Loyalty may be enhanced by the follower trying to mentally place himself in the place of the leader. Why would a follower do that? So he can feel the heartbeat of the leader. Strong leaders are often not good communicators. And if you don't get the heart of the leader, you won't know which way to go, and you yourself may then wind up at the wrong place. If a man disobeys the one in authority, he is disloyal. But if a man only does just what he's told to do, he's still not truly loyal. There is more to loyalty than raw obedience. Loyalty is obedience from the heart. True loyalty is heart loyalty. I am now an assistant pastor at our church. My assistant pastor and I traded places. He became the pastor. I became his assistant. Now, anytime I'm in Lincoln, I'm looking for anything I can do to serve him. In fact, you know something I found out, preacher? I found out I'm addicted to ministry. You remember in Corinthians it talks about the household of Stephanus was addicted to the ministry. I found out I'm addicted to ministry. I had been gone from our church for like 4 months, traveling, speaking different things. And I was back there then on a Wednesday and a Sunday and a Wednesday. And I had nothing to do. Nothing. Nothing. I mean, nothing. Nothing. I sat in the pew. I about went crazy. After that week, I went to Pastor Basin and I said, Brother Basin, you're my pastor. And I said, whenever I'm here, I got to have something. I said, I'm not asking to preach. You're a preacher. I don't care what you give me to do. I can drive a bus. I can sing a song. I can work in junior church. I could even try to work in the nursery, but I don't think you really want me in there. But I said, I found out something. I cannot just sit. Let me tell you, everybody ought to be that way. That ought not just be me after 36 and a half years of pastoring. Everybody ought to say, there ought to be folks come up to Pastor Duffett after church tonight and say, Brother Duffett, give me something to do. Here's my name. Now, he might not be, if 20 people do that, he might not be able to give everybody something to do. But write your name down, hand it to him and say, I'm looking for something to do. I need something to do. Give me something to do. And then if he doesn't get back to you in a week, walk up to him and say, I've been praying all week. Would you like me to serve here, here, or here? Get addicted to the ministry. Get involved in the ministry and get the heart of your leader. I was back at church. I was back at Park Meadows, my church. In Illinois, I'd been gone for several weeks. I was back there one Sunday. And I looked around. I was shaking hands, fellowshipping, shaking hands with folks, meeting new folks in the church, greeting visitors, all this. And the service was over, and I noticed 2 people sitting over here. I walked over, introduced myself, Dennis and Kathy Moran. How y'all? So good to meet you. I'm Pastor Davis. I said, I was the pastor here for a lot of years. Yeah, we've heard about it. I said, it's so good to see y'all. And I said, y'all, I noticed they were just sitting there. I said, y'all have a way home? They said, Pastor Basin picked us up and brought us today. And I said, y'all want to go home? I think he'd be fine if I gave you a ride home. And I ran to his office. He was busy talking to somebody. I said, Brother Basin, 5 seconds. Morans are out here. Going to give them a ride home so you don't have to worry about it. Thank you, Brother Davis. You know what? I was trying to understand the heart of the leader. You see that? Can I tell you the heart of your pastor? The heart of your pastor is nobody should ever have a problem getting to church. Amen. Anything you have to do to get somebody to church, you get them to church. Amen. And anything you have to do to make folks feel welcome, I don't care what it is, you got to do it. Anything you can do. That's the heart of your leader. Now you got to get the heart of your leader. If you get the heart of your leader, then you'll help him make everybody welcome. You'll always be thinking, I'm always walking around the church looking for visitors, wondering who has not been made welcome, who has a need here, who needs encouraging, because I know that's what he would want me to do, because that's what I wanted people to do. Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters, not with eye service as men pleasers. You see, surface loyalty is like disloyalty. But as the servants of Christ doing the will of God from the heart, true loyalty is heart loyalty. Loyalty looks for ways to please. There is a spirit about loyalty that gives it its power. Loyalty listens. Loyalty is attentive. Loyalty is the son who washes the car without being asked, simply because he knows his dad would be pleased. Loyalty is the daughter who joyfully wears clothes that dad wants just because dad wants them. I loved it years ago when my children were still at home and my girls would come out on Sunday morning. I had this happen more than once. And one of my girls would say, Dad, is this dress all right? I think it is, but if you think it's not, I'll go put something else on. That's the way every girl in this room ought to be in relation to her daddy. David, at one point, I love this story. wished out loud he could have a drink of water out of the well at Bethlehem. And 3 of his mighty men battled their way through an enemy line to get their commander a drink of water. He was so impressed, he said, he gave it as an offering to God. By the way, loyalty provides the strength needed to advance. Imagine the strength that David felt from men who would give their lives to provide him a drink of water. General Robert E. Lee, and I know they're Southern generals, I also believe they were great Christian gentlemen. There were great men on both sides of the Civil War. General Robert E. Lee sent word to Stonewall Jackson that he would like to see him whenever he happened to be in the area. And as soon as Jackson got the message, he rode 8 miles on horseback through a heavy snowstorm. And General Lee said, I didn't send for you, General Jackson. I only said the next time you rode this way, I'd like to see you. I know that, replied Jackson, but you said you wish to see me, and your slightest wish is a command to me. Are you loyal? Loyalty is seen the clearest when the opportunity for disloyalty is the greatest. A disloyal person is given great opportunities by God to show loyalty. Who would have criticized David if he had been disloyal to Saul when Saul was trying to kill him? But it was against the dark backdrop of Saul's ugliness that David's loyalty shone through like a diamond ring looks the most beautiful placed on a dark background. In your life there will be tests of loyalty. Your father will be angry and unjust. Your mother will be partial to your sister. Your pastor will say something in front of the whole church that you're just sure was a slap to you personally. Your employer will give the hardest job with the filthiest conditions and the most ridiculous deadlines to you. 1 Peter 2:18, servants, be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward. You can do one of two things. You can pout, complain, and whine to others and develop a spirit and attitude of disloyalty, or you can recognize this may be the greatest opportunity of your life to demonstrate loyalty. Are you loyal? Number 7, a person demonstrates where his loyalties lie by those to whom he passes praise. Actually, this is in some ways perhaps the key point of this entire message. Have you ever noticed how Jesus was continually demonstrating loyalty by passing praise to the Father? The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness of me. Jesus said all the works he did were not done in his name, but in his Father's name. John 10:32, Jesus answered, many good works have I showed you from my Father. John 14:28, you've heard how that I said unto you, I go away and come again unto you. If you love me, you rejoice because I said, I go unto the Father, for my Father is greater than I. That is not a denial of deity. It is an affirmation of loyalty from the Son to the Father. John 15, all things that I have heard of my Father I have made known unto you. Jesus was passing the praise to the Father for all the things he taught his disciples. I was in a conversation with a lady and I commented to her there was great wisdom in what she was saying. And immediately she replied, well, if it was wise, I'm sure I learned it from my husband because he's such a wise man. Then I was amazed at both her wisdom and her loyalty. I love it. When I comment to a young man that the lawn he has mowed looks neat and orderly, and he replies, Dad taught me how to mow the yard. He's passing the praise to his dad. I love it when a young lady is complimented for her hair, and she says, my mom taught me how to do my hair. Or somebody says, I love that dress you're wearing, and she says, I wore it because my daddy likes it. One of the greatest examples in the Bible of passing praise was in 2 Samuel 12 when Israel's captain had surrounded the city of Rabbah and it was ready to fall. Joab sent messengers to David and said, come quickly and take this city so you can have the credit instead of me. Did you know that this is the way a disloyal person checks to find out whether or not you are disloyal? If you are praised, you accept the praise instead of passing it along to those you're serving, You may also be a candidate to hear negative thoughts about your leader. There's a preacher, friend of mine, highly respected for his wisdom, was called about a church that was having critical problems. The church had already chosen sides and was ready to split, and by the time he arrived there, the pastor's followers were sitting on one side of the room, the assistant pastors on the other side. But both sides had agreed to let the guest preacher come in and mediate the fight, and they would at least listen to what he had to say. Now, what in the world could he say or do that would solve such a problem? He asked the assistant pastor to pick him up at the airport, and after exchanging general greetings, they're in the car, and the preacher said, "How long, sir, have you been at the church?" "Several years." "Have you had a fruitful ministry?" "Yes, God has seemed to bless in a wonderful way." "I suppose there are people in the church who have really appreciated your ministry." "Yes, sir, occasionally." "And they told you your ministry was a blessing?" "Yes, sir, occasionally." "And what have you said when they told you this?" "I would say, 'Thank you.'" And the preacher got an alarmed look on his face and said, "You told him what?" I said, "Thank you." And the preacher at that point dropped his head, began to groan and sigh and say, "Oh, tell me you did not say that." "Say what?" "All I said was thank you." He kept doing that a little while. The assistant pastor said, "Tell me what I did that was wrong. I really don't know what it was." And the preacher said, "Sir, you had an opportunity to demonstrate loyalty. Instead, you demonstrated disloyalty. When those people told you they appreciated your ministry, you should have passed the praise for your ministry to the pastor. You should have said, 'Thank the pastor. If it were not for him, I wouldn't be able to be here. My ministry is really here.'" That's the reason people, everywhere I go, people very graciously will shake my hand, say, "Thank you for coming here." And I say, "Thank the pastor. He's the one who invited me here. I could not be speaking here. This is not my pulpit. This is his pulpit. And I could not be standing up here if it were not for him." And this preacher said, when you did that, you created an atmosphere where people could share with you areas where they had disagreements with the pastor, and the people would begin to follow you instead of the pastor. And finally the fellow said, "What do I do?" My preacher friend said, "You need to confess your wrong before all those who have taken your side. Ask them all to forgive you. Put their loyalty back with the pastor." They walked into the church, entered a large fellowship hall area set up with chairs. On one side they were following the pastor. On the other side they were following the assistant pastor. The guest preacher took charge, opened in prayer. Then he explained that the assistant pastor needed to say a few words. The assistant pastor got up, explained where he was wrong. With brokenness, asked forgiveness. Asked all those following him to put their loyalty back with the pastor. One man got up and said some angry things and walked out. "Cast out the scorner, strife shall cease." Rest of the church was reconciled. And people learned that a person demonstrates his loyalties, where his loyalties lie, by those to whom he passes praise. The first 3 months, I was no longer a pastor. We had an agreement that I would disappear for 3 months. But I'd been pastor for 36 and a half years. Good night. You know? And so we had an agreement, Brother Bays and I had an agreement. I was going to disappear for 3 months. And during those 3 months, then he could do whatever he wanted to do. I had already told the church he's going to change things. Y'all accept it. It's going to be great. And he did. And it's been great. And by the way, I've had people come to me and say, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And I say, "I think it's wonderful. I think he's doing a great job." He's kept the main thing the main thing. What else matters? You know? And so anyway, I had visited 2 or 3. I didn't have very many preaching appointments for those first couple of months. And so I was visiting churches all over the area. And it occurred to me, I should not be visiting in my name. I should be visiting in His name. I went to him and I said, "I would like to start telling the folks that I'd like to start building you, Pastor, in this area. I'd like to build your respect in this area. I'd like to take a gift from you. If you'd like to write a letter, I want to tell the folks I'm visiting this church tonight because you asked me to visit this church tonight. I want to build you." I'd been a pastor for about 4 or 5 months. And it hit me one day. I need to do something. I went back to Pastor Bazin because when I'm home, I visit the hospital, I visit folks. There are folks, after all these years, I've got contact with that Brother Bazin doesn't have contact with. I've been able to go to funerals and weddings and things and introduce him. This is our new pastor, Brother Bazin. Want you to meet him. He's doing a great job. You folks are such a blessing, and I know you'll love him. He's just a wonderful man of God. I went to him, and I said, now, Pastor Bazin, I need to get blanket permission from you for something. He said, what's that, Brother Davis? I said, I want to get blanket permission because I'll be visiting the hospital, I'll be soul winning, I'll be visiting home. I want to get blanket permission that every single person I ever visit anywhere around this whole area, that I can say to them, Pastor Bazin asked me to come and visit you. I want to push him. I want to build him. I want to build their relationship with him. I told you this morning, I think. I don't remember. There was some folk. There was a family at church sitting on the back row that hadn't been saved. Did I tell that this morning? Did I tell that? And I went through the whole plan of salvation with that man. I told you I took him to the altar. I didn't tell you everything.
Well, tell him again. Half the crowd probably wasn't here.
Oh, okay. All right. I was. All right. How many of y'all weren't here this morning when I told that? Good night. You're right. Okay. Anyway, I was at church just 2.5 weeks ago on Wednesday night, and there's this family. It's just their third time in church, and service was over, and almost everybody was gone. I looked over, and there their whole family sits on the back row over there, just sitting there. It's like everybody else is gone. Here's this visiting family. I mean, you don't see that. That doesn't happen. You know that doesn't happen. Almost everybody's going out of the auditorium. They're just sitting there. It's like the Holy Spirit said, there's your grand opportunity. Go, go. I walked over there. The lady had already been saved, and God had brought some difficulties in their life that were drawing them to Christ. And I walked over and I talked to him, and I witnessed him for just a second. Found like he was fruit ready to fall off the tree. And I explained the plan of salvation. It didn't take long. He had already gotten it. But I made it clear to him. And then I said, let's go to the front and kneel at the front and get saved. I know he could have got saved there. When you're in church, I love to have a guy kneel. I like that. We men need humbling. We're all too proud. You know, there's some men here tonight. You ought to come and kneel in this altar just because you hadn't done it for 6 months. Amen. And just humble yourself. We men tend to be pride. The 3 big sins of men are anger, lust, and pride. I have messages on all 3 of those on the table. And every once in a while, you ought to just come to the altar just to say, I'm not some big shot standing back here. I'm going to the altar. I'm going to humble myself. Get down on your face in front of God. I don't know how you like to pray, preacher, but you know what I like to do? When I'm by myself, I like to just stretch out on my face before God and just cry out to God. I love to do that. Well, anyway, I had him come to the front, and I looked as we were coming to the front, and there's Pastor Bazin standing right at the front. And he was talking to somebody, but I could tell it wasn't super important. If it had been super important, I wouldn't have interrupted him. But I went over and I said, Pastor Bazin, can you come here? And he was able to break away. I said, this man's ready to get saved. I want you to lead him. And so he led him to Christ. Because, look, I'm gone. And even if I wasn't gone, I'm the assistant pastor, not the pastor. Everything I can to knit his heart with those people, that's what I want to do. That's my job. That's why I'm there now. I learned that. I was a pastor for all of those years. Now, a person demonstrates where his loyalties lie by those to whom he passes praise. Are you loyalty? Number 8, watch this, awfully important. Loyalty is destroyed by bitterness or becoming offended. David's nephew Joab appears to have been loyal to David for several years as the captain of his army, but Joab got bitter apparently because of something that happened in his family. Abner had been King Saul's captain and had made Saul's son Ishbosheth king in Saul's place. One day there was a battle between Joab's men and Abner's men were beaten and running away. And Asahel, Joab's baby brother, was chasing after Abner. And Abner said to Asahel, turn thee aside from following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? Howbeit he refused to turn aside. Wherefore Abner with the hinder end of the spear smote smote him under the 5th rib, that the spear came out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. In the next chapter, Abner comes to David to make peace and give him the kingdom. It is now a time of peace, not a time of war. But Joab wants revenge for his baby brother's death, and Joab deceitfully takes Abner aside like he wants to talk to him, and he stabs him to death. And after, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house. And man, these are strong words. Let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or that is a leper, leans on a staff, etc. It's a curse. And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, he made Joab mourn over the man he had killed. Rend your clothes, gird you with sackcloth, and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier, or the casket. Loyalty is destroyed by bitterness or becoming offended. Are you loyal? Number 9, a loyal person will not have his own agenda. Joab is now bitter. For the rest of his life, as long as Joab was told to do something he wanted to do, he would do it. He appears to be loyal on the surface, but he is no longer truly loyal to David. From now on, he's loyal to himself. He has his own agenda. When it comes time to deal with Absalom, David doesn't trust Joab. He does something very much out of the ordinary. He calls in Joab, Abishai, Joab's brother, and Ittai the Gittite. You remember Ittai, Mr. Loyalty. He can be trusted, and Abishai can be trusted. He is the one who, Abishai is the one who called David the Lord's anointed. He also was upset over his baby brother Asael's death, but it did not destroy his loyalty. 3 times in his life, Abishai wanted to kill somebody. Once he wanted to kill King Saul. Twice he wanted to kill Shimei. All 3 times David said no, and Abishai said, yes, sir. Now, you got to understand, Abishai was not a weakling. The Bible describes how Abishai fought and killed 300 men single-handedly with a spear. That's not a weakling. In 2 Samuel 21, David and his men were battling the Philistines, and Abishai was close by his King David, and a colossal, powerful, raging giant named Ishbi-Benob, probably one of the sons of Goliath, came after David with a new sword. David was weak and faint and would have been killed, and Abishai saw what was happening, stepped in and killed the giant and saved his king's life. Abishai is no weakling, and he's not a yes man who never thought for himself, but he was loyal. He can be trusted. Ittai could be trusted. Joab can't be trusted. So David divides the army among the 3 of them. The king is cutting back on Joab's responsibility, thereby trying to neutralize some of his power, influence, and disloyalty. To those who understand the principles involved, David's extraordinary patience here is actually beginning to turn into tolerance of evil. David gives specific instructions to these 3 captains. The king commanded Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man, even with Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains charge concerning Absalom. But Joab isn't loyal. Joab has his own agenda. He's already made up his mind what he's going to do. He did it before with Abner, and he was able to keep his position as captain. He's going to do it again now. If you were to crawl inside Joab's mind and listen to his thinking processes, they're probably going something like this. I'm so loyal to you, David, I think I know better than you. Just because you decided the best way to win this war is by sparing your son Absalom the rebel doesn't mean you're right. My way's better than your way, but you'll never hear about it, so I'll just have to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go against your wishes for your own good. It is not, read it please, it is not possible for a loyal person to listen, smile, and then go and do whatever he wants to do. Joab finds Absalom hanging by his hair from the limb of a tree. He takes 3 arrows in his hand, thrusts them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. Now, all the reasons why David wanted to spare Absalom, we may never know. When one in authority makes decisions, those following don't always understand. That's why loyalty is so important. One reason may have been that David knew the grief would be more than he could bear. Man, have you read that passage? What does disloyal murderer Joab do? He scorns David's grief. It is not possible to scorn someone to whom you are truly loyal. David is now done with Joab. It is too late for further damage control. He feels he can trust anyone more than Joab, and his appointment to take Joab's place is a shocker. He appoints Amasa, the man who was Absalom's captain, to take Joab's place. He can trust anybody more than he can his own General Joab. What does Joab do? He murders Amasa in almost identically the same way he murdered Abner. A loyal person will not have his own agenda. Are you loyal? Number 10, followers who follow leader followers must keep their loyalty first with the leader. Interesting here. Amazing thing in 2 Samuel 23, David is listing who his mighty men were. Guess who is not in the list of David's mighty men? He was David's general for most of David's kingdom's life. Joab is not listed. Guess who is in the list? Joab's armor bearer by the name of Naharai. That's like recognizing the golf caddy and forgetting the golfer. How could the armor bearer keep his loyalty when the man he was serving under, Joab, did not? While being loyal to Joab, he also kept looking past Joab to see the main leader, who was David. Employees, obey whoever is over you. Don't ever take your eyes off the manager. I know a church where an assistant pastor was allowed to quietly leave after he committed adultery, and within 5 weeks, 5 families left with him. Why? They had greater loyalty with the assistant pastor than with the pastor. As far as I know, those families never knew that the man they followed was an adulterer. I heard recently, just in the last few weeks, about an assistant pastor, and it was known that he had committed adultery, and he had to leave the church, and he still had a whole group of people leave with him. Do you know why? Let me throw this in here. I don't know anything about your church. I love your church. Man, what a church. Do you know why a pastor brings an assistant pastor? So the church can continue to grow. Because a pastor alone can only meet the needs of a certain number of people, so he has to have other people to help meet those needs. Now, he does that knowing there will be people in the church who will give their primary loyalty to this assistant, whoever it is. Is that a problem? Not as long as the assistant keeps his loyalty with the pastor. You see, people are already doing it with me. I knew they would. I was ready for it. People are already coming to me, and they'll say things like this. You know, we love Pastor Basin, but we really miss you. You know, and I look back and I'll say, he is doing a wonderful job. I am so glad he's our pastor, and I'm thrilled with what he's doing. And you know what, preacher? As long as I stay loyal to him, it won't be a problem. There will be people who will have more loyalty with me, perhaps, no matter what I do, than with him. As long as I'm loyal to him, it's all right. The church stays together. The day that I get a wild hair, God forbid, I hope I die first. Did you hear me say that? God heard me say that. I don't want to damage the church that I spent all those years pastoring and building. And I'd rather die first. But the day that I got some kind of wild hair, and then those people would be coming to me. And there would be a spirit in the services. You could feel the underlying rebellious spirit. You can feel it when it comes. And there would be a hindering spirit that would keep lost people from getting saved. That would keep you from enjoying your services like you can enjoy them right now. Don't you ever do that. It's fine for you to love an assistant or whoever's on the staff here, but you don't ever take your eyes off the main pastor. And you keep your main loyalty with him. I know a church where the pastor sat on the platform, looked up and saw an assistant pastor sitting in the balcony where he had specifically asked the assistant pastor not to sit. And around the assistant pastor were seated 50 people. And the thought occurred to the pastor, he's got his own church sitting up there with him. Then he thought, no, I'm just dreaming. But he wasn't dreaming. A few months later, that assistant pastor resigned, left the church under less than ideal circumstances, and within 6 months, virtually every person who'd been sitting with him in the balcony had also left the church. Why? They had their primary loyalty there. And you know what happens? An assistant pastor could easily, without even trying to do so, and again, I'm not even sure exactly who the assistant pastors are here. All right? So I'm not, and as far as I know, everything's great here. I really think it is. This is an amazing church. But an assistant pastor, without trying to do so, can cause more people to leave a church in a few weeks or months than he may have brought into the church in several years of ministry. Which means that he not only damages the church, he damages his own spiritual legacy. Influence that God gives you is not a light switch that you can throw on and off. Followers who follow followers must keep their loyalty first with the leader. Christian, follow whatever authority God puts over your life, and don't ever take your eyes off of Jesus. You always, He's the main one that you're always following and always serving. Are you loyal? Number 11, only the leader knows if the follower is truly loyal. Let's ask Joab a question during the battle against rebel Absalom. Joab, are you loyal to David? Listen to his answer. Of course I'm loyal. I'm out here fighting and putting my life on the line to save his throne. True loyalty is not in the eyes of the follower, it's in the eyes of the leader. If a child tells me he is loyal and the parent tells me he is not, I'll believe the parent and try to help the child. There's something about shifting seats from that of follower to leader that sometimes wakes a person up. There may be adults here tonight who thought you were loyal to your parents when you were at home. Then you established your own home and you began to realize you weren't really loyal at all. So you went back and made things right, but you can't turn the clock back and wish you had. A wise question anyone should consider asking the one in authority over them. I did this when I reached my 6-month mark a few weeks ago as assistant pastor. I sat down with Pastor Bazin and I said, Pastor Bazin, once every 6 months I'm going to ask you a key question. I expect an honest answer. You can tell me anything you want to tell me. I want to hear it. Is there any area of my life where you need to see me demonstrating greater loyalty than you have seen in the last 6 months? I want to know it. You have to be honest with me. He was very gracious in his answer. Are you loyal? Here, let's look at all these points and I'll give you the last one. Everybody read them with me, would you please? Wisely and consciously choose those to whom you give your loyalty. Give loyalty to people and positions, not just to personalities. Loyalty to human leadership is really loyalty to God Himself. Loyalty is needed to make you what you ought to be. A loyal person seeks to understand both the words and the heart of his leader. Loyalty is seen the clearest when the opportunity for disloyalty is the greatest. A person demonstrates where his loyalties lie by those to whom he passes praise. Loyalty is destroyed by bitterness or becoming offended. A loyal person will not have his own agenda. Followers who follow leader followers must keep their loyalty first with the leader. Only the leader knows if the follower is truly loyal, and true loyalty is not fully known until the end of life. In any area of life, including loyalty, you must finish the race or lose the reward. There is no true loyalty without consistency. I was impressed. I heard this. I was gone for our church's mission conference, and we had three national pastors from Malawi. And they stayed with a family in our church with a lot of children. And the husband and wife were talking to these folks. They fed them a meal one day. And they were talking to these 3 national pastors from Malawi. And they said to these national pastors, would you tell us, is there any area specifically that we could pray for you about? And the folks in our church said, Brother Davis, I was astounded at what happened. They said, it was actually 2 of the 3 that were there. They said it was as though they had rehearsed their answer. And the answer came out word for word at the same time from both men, and it was not rehearsed. And the words were these: pray that we finish well. Pray we finish well. I'm 61, preacher. God's my witness. I mean this with all my soul. I would rather drop dead right now, and hope I don't. But I'd rather drop dead right now than mess up at the end. I don't want to do that. You know, my kids are here tonight. I got grandkids. I don't want to leave a testimony that I'd rather die and leave a good testimony than mess up and leave a bad testimony. And, you know, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, but I would, in some way, I would hurt the name of Christ if I mess up now. Now, I don't want to do that, especially to my Savior. 2 Samuel 23, David lists his mighty men, his most loyal soldiers. Begins with this statement now. These be the last words of David. Who is in this list of mighty men? Abishai, Asahel, Joab's brothers, Idai the Gittite, Uriah the Hittite, 33 other great men, and not Joab. The 2 men who probably knew David better than anyone else were Nathan the prophet and Joab the general. Both men knew how to move David with emotional word pictures. That's a key way that you move a person in authority. Nathan used the story of the pet lamb being killed by the rich man to bring David to repentance after his adultery. Joab used the one of Tekoa's story about her 2 sons to get David to bring Absalom back home. Nathan the prophet used his knowledge of David to help David preserve the kingdom and promote the will of God. And when David was on his deathbed and the wrong man was about to become king, Nathan knew the strategy to use to see that David took action and that Solomon, God's choice and David's choice, became king. Nathan literally saved the lives of Solomon and his mother, and Nathan's sons became leaders in Solomon's kingdom. There it is. Notice, Azariah, son of Nathan, over the officers. Zabud, son of Nathan, principal officer, and the king's friend. It was natural for Nathan's sons to be loyal to Solomon. Their father had been loyal to Solomon's father. Joab, on the other hand, knew how patient and tolerant David was. Joab had enough power that he continually used David's strengths and weaknesses against David and to promote his own agenda. When Adonijah decided to take over the throne, he enlisted Joab's help. And when the attempt failed, Joab realized his disloyalty was about to cost him his life. And Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord, caught hold on the horns of the altar. And it was told King Solomon that Joab was fled to the tabernacle of the Lord, and behold, he's by the altar. Then Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, saying, go, fall upon him. So Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, went up and fell upon him and slew him. What a tragic end to a potentially great life. Joab's life, strength, boldness, energy, wisdom, shrewdness, talent, common sense, ability, and skill wasted. He's hanging on to the horns of the altar, hoping somehow or other to find mercy when no mercy for his continual disloyalty is left to be found. Better if Joab had died in his youth while he was still loyal to his king. No wonder Dr. Bob Jones Sr. said, read it with me, would you please? If you ain't loyal, you ain't nothing. There was that girl that I began with tonight. They're looking, her dad had been killed in an automobile accident, and they're going through Dad's diary, and she's grabbed the diary and she said, I won't find my page. She slipped over several. There was her name written across the top of a page. Breathlessly, she read what was written underneath her name. And it read, Oh God, my heart is broken. This daughter is breaking my heart. She won't listen to me. I've tried everything I know to do. I've prayed, I've wept, I've talked. She dishonors me. She won't obey me. God, please give me some kind of deliverance. And the girl was awestruck. And she said to the evangelist, I didn't know my daddy felt that way. I knew I didn't get along with Daddy, but I didn't think it was that bad. Oh yeah, I guess I did oppose him. There were times I wasn't sweet to him, but I didn't think it was that bad. And she wound up with these words, oh, with the tears streaming down her face, if I only had 24 hours to be with my Father, I would make everything right. Oh, if God would only give me 24 hours. Oh, if I only had one day, I would get it right with my Father. Are you loyal? Heavenly Father, God, use the message to strengthen the homes here. Help children not right with Dad and Mom to get right with Dad and Mom. If there's anybody here not right with their pastor, help them to get right with their pastor. If there's somebody here tonight who's lost, may they realize they ultimately need Jesus as their Savior, and their life will never be what it ought to be unless they trust you. And God, grant that folks will do now. Lord, we don't want somebody winding up like Joab did. Lord, help somebody to wake up tonight instead of later.